In the room today is a nutrient agronomist who rang me 3 years ago, and LawrieCo had been doing quite a bit in carbon, just trying to get things started. And Jamie Weatherall rang me up and said, I've got a couple of farmers here that'd like to learn a bit about carbon. How about you come down to the Border Town Hotel and we'll do a talk. So we went down there and gave an overview on carbon, and I think there was nearly 20 farmers at that evening, and 12 or 15 of those signed up their whole farms immediately, and I thought I'd better learn a lot about this. So congratulations, Jamie. You really are a pioneer in the market, and we're hugely grateful. But more importantly, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about LawrieCo, where LawrieCo came from and where carbon fits into us, and then also about AgriProve. So by way of background, I'm a very chemical-driven person. I had 24 years with Elders. I had the pleasure of working with Riney for a lot of years as well. And about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, LawrieCo asked me to come and have a look at the business and what we were doing within the business. And the more I learnt about it, the more excited I got. And so the history of LawrieCo was Adrian Laurie was a farmer out of South Australia, and his soil organic carbon just continued to fall on the farm. And so their agronomist was saying, put more of this on and put more of that, and they really weren't getting an outcome. And so he started on the journey now the company was formed 26 years ago, but it was probably 28 years ago that he started studying on the very topics that we've been talking about today. And so during that journey, the whole measure of success, or the DNA of LawrieCo, has been around how do you build soil organic carbon? Obviously not to trade carbon, but to use that as a measure of soil health. And so that's been the real driver. And then the principal today and the head of AgriProve and the lorries and a group of others started working with the government about 10 or 12 years ago on forming up the carbon trading methodology. And then they asked me to come in and do some work for the business, and every time I walked past an office, someone was talking to the government on this methodology, and I thought, I can't see that we're going to make any money out of this. So I said, why don't we focus on basically just the advice and the products and the things that we're good at, and we leave the financial services experts to go and do what they were doing. So Matthew Warnican, who was in with us then, went off, and that sort of started the formation of AgriProve. And as we went through the journey, it was also important for us to say, well, okay, how do we build something for farmers that's simple and practical and that has a bit of an outcome? And so we started a partnership with AgriProve. And I guess if you look at the synergies between the two organisations, AgriProve have all of the skill in how to manage the back end of the business and what do we do with carbon projects. And the more I've been involved with it, the more I've learnt that the back end of it is extremely complicated. And so to me, it's like getting an accountant or a financial advisor or something to go and run that part such that you don't have to spend too much time on it. And so we formed a partnership. They've had an enormous success in the grazing market and the pasture market. And it's always been the Laurie family's view that we feel that in broadacre cropping environments, also in low rainfall, in sandy soils, and all the things that all the traditionalists say you can't build carbon in, that's basically been their bread and butter. And so we said, we'll build this and focus this around mainstream, large-scale agriculture and make it seamless. And so I hope I don't offend anyone in here, but coming from my synthetic background, I don't really like the word regenerative, only because I think people feel you've got to go a 180 degree on what you're doing. So within our business, we try to talk about it being fusion farming, because what we want to do is set up systems that go through mainstream agriculture that are easy to use, and we've witnessed that here at the Kemps, but also that have the opportunity to increase yield, productivity, sustainability, and now, of course, carbon trading. So I thought what I'd do is just give you some examples of now what we're doing and where we've got to since the 3 years ago and setting up the Southeast. So we've now got a large share of the soil carbon projects in Australia. So Mel talked about over 700. We've got over 250 soil carbon projects now and large scale. And I think one of the differences is that the view that we have within the business is that in a cropping environment, the reason we're getting results is because you're going over so many times, whereas in grazing you're often only going to do something once a year and in some cases not at all. And so it's all about picking up Rod's point. It's all about saying how do you actually stimulate and how do you grow that, and how do you actually, each time you're doing a pass, how do you look after the soil while you're feeding the crop. So we started on this journey. There has never been, I was saying to Mel earlier from AgriProof, there's never been any doubt in the Laurie's mind or in our business's mind that we could build soil carbon. But of course, prior to the method coming in, all we'd done was 10 centimetres. You know, you do your normal soil test and you go, oh, this is what the carbon is. Under the method, of course, we're testing down to a metre, so we didn't know what was going to happen there. And of course, you would all be very aware, everyone tells us, no, you can't build soil carbon in here. And so we thought, okay, so we've now got sort of the 4,500 soil test points in and we've started all these projects, so what's happened? And we expected, in our view, that it was going to be 2 to 5 years to build carbon. And one of the beauties with the AgriProof relationship is they've invested heavily in satellite technology. So it's enabled us to go and download the data every 12 months over all of our projects and look for a lead indicator and decide when we send the rigs back in to go and do another test. You say, oh, what's the importance of that? Well, I think to look at carbon farming, it's thrown away quite loosely. We actually are. All of a sudden you're farming microbes, you're farming another whole thing. So it's literally just thinking about it a little bit differently on what you do to produce and sequester carbon. And so we started on this whole thing, and after 12 months, we've had a number of projects that have come back with positive lead indicators. So we've got a couple of people in the room today who are going through the actual audit process now for the issuance of credits. And I just want to talk a little bit about what happened and how new this whole market is. So we've got Luke Felmingham from the Goulburn Valley. And so on Luke's projects, what we did there was, I'll let Luke speak to how excited he was or how sceptical he was at the start in a minute. But what we did was we sent the satellite data came in, it showed massive lead indicator feedback that we got from AgriProof. So we sent the test rigs back in again, and the results of that came back so high, we thought we can't submit this to the Clean Energy Regulator. So we sent the rigs back in again, so went and did another retest, and that's come back again at the same as the first level, and Luke's now gone to audit. And at a gross number, it's looking at about $1,600 a hectare that's come in, which is absolutely astronomical in a little bit over 12 months. So sorry to put you on the spot, Luke. Just I think given that we're saying that this is theoretical to actual, I wouldn't mind asking you what your first thoughts were when Brendan, our business development manager in Shepparton, spoke to you about carbon and what your expectations were.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm pretty pessimistic. So we come across Brendan because he goes out with my parents for dinner pretty often. And I said to the old man, surely Brendan's not stupid enough to rip us off, so we'll give this a go. I'm fairly money orientated, and that's pretty much it with me in a nutshell. So we signed 2/3 of our property into the carbon project just to leave a little bit open just in case it's a shit idea. It turns out it's probably not a bad idea because one of the blocks, obviously what Matt's talking about, excelled, and they'd done the baseline, they'd come back and they'd done the second lot of testing. And then they wanted me to do this satellite stuff, so I had to sign my life away again. And then they wanted, and that paddock was in canola. So how far along was that? It was nearly to flowering. It was pretty close. And AgriProof and saying, let's go back and sample it. And this was last year when it was bloody wet. So there was some fairly stern words said, you know, if you get bogged, you're staying there. You know how advanced the crop is. Brendan, is there money in this for me? Like, is it worth it? And he's promising me it's worth it, it's worth it. So yeah, that was that thing in a nutshell with that project. And yeah, hopefully it sort of pays dividends. So following that, we signed another block in that I bought recently into the project again. So yeah, we're slowly adding to it. So what else?
Excellent.
What else? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure they might have a few questions for you a bit later as well. But I think that if you're sitting and, you know, we talk all over Australia now to lots of different farmers, and, you know, if you're sitting there and you're sceptical, completely understand. Everyone's entering it at the same position, and it is such an emerging market. We're all sort of going, are we better to be a first mover? Are we better to hold back? We completely get that. And so what we've done within our business, there's two things that we talk about throughout the business. Number one is crawl, walk, run. And I think in talking through what we've gone over this morning and with biology, that's absolutely critical, and it's what the Kemps have done here. First of all, go and try a few things, see how it works, touch it, feel it. Next thing, speed it up and see what you're doing. And then once you're comfortable with the results, you can really go and run with it. And it's been absolutely fascinating for us how that's worked. The second point, just linking into the discussion this morning, is as we go on this journey of a movement into biological inputs, I think the critical thing is to understand you need to earn the right. And I'll use an example of Brendan had a large client down in Gippsland, said, oh, we want to go down this stream, we're going to go away from SSP and we're going to put guano across the whole program. And Brendan said, no, we don't want you to do that. Why do you think they might not have, why do you think it might be best not to do that in year one? Sorry, what's that? Yeah, that's one. Absolutely. You want to keep an area where you can go, did that work, did it not work? So one of the key things is we find that people that haven't focused and farms that haven't focused on their biology at all, if you're going to go to a guano type product, which is much better for you, but you still need a high level of microbial activity to break down the product. So if you go and you would have heard of it, people go, oh, we want to go away from a synthetic and we want to put a guano on, oh, it didn't work. Well, it's not that it didn't work, it's just that you had no biological activity in the soil. So Harry, our national carbon agronomist, with a lot of the projects we're doing now is we're doing two things. Number one is that we're pulling apart microbial tests and actually having a look at the populations and what you've actually got from day one and what starts there. And then the other part is we're also analysing the soil test to say, how do we link that to a simple eligible activity? Because what Mel talked about, when you start a carbon project, you have to have an eligible activity, so some newness. And there's a lot of different things, so rotational grazing, I think you brought up before, that, you know, use of irrigation water, there's things like delving, there's things liming, gypsum, all those sorts of things. But there's quite a simple one, which is the addition of nutrition to rectify a deficiency. So we also look at that and just say, well, okay, how do we keep this simple? Is there a deficiency or a mineral that we can put into that program that therefore says it complies with everything with the Clean Energy Regulator and it actually builds production but also sequestered carbon? So the next part in going through this journey now is we get a lot of people say, so what are the benefits of setting up a carbon project and what are the co-benefits? Because we want to know that, you know, people that are buying the carbon credits, they want to know how it's done. And I said, well, I think you're looking at it incorrectly. I think the co-benefit of a carbon project is the actual issuance of credits. The main benefit of a carbon project is about doing all of the things that were talked about this morning, building productivity, food quality, sustainability, soil friability, soil health, resilience to drought. And then as a byproduct in doing all of those things that we would ordinarily do in our production systems or the trajectory we're trying to do, as a byproduct of doing all that, you actually get paid for remediating your soil. And I don't think there's much better opportunity that I've seen in agriculture. So right in those days where my hair was dark and used to stand up, there's certainly not a bigger opportunity that I've seen in agriculture that's emerging. So the other one, with a number of Jamie's clients, we've also got Jeff Vivian at Conniva. So Jeff was one of the early adopters in setting up a carbon project with us. And same thing. So we flew the satellites over, came back, said there's a lead indicator on it. We sent the rigs back in. And I'll let Jeff just answer a couple of questions. But fundamentally, no, I won't speak on his behalf. So at the moment, we're over nearly 18 months about to go to audit of it, and it's looking at just under $1,000 a hectare. So again, way above what we thought it would be. So Jeff, I wondered, just a bit like Luke, if you could sort of have a couple of quick words and just say how did you set it up and what have you done? I'm scared.
Yeah, I was a bit sceptical too with setting the job up, but the opportunity came with that meeting. Yeah, we said, "Oh, how many hectares do you have to sign up?" And I said, "The lot, or you can set up a block, or whatever you think." Yeah, so we owned 3,000 and at least 3,000, so that was easy. So we said, "We'll do the 3,000 and we'll go that way that we own." And yeah, that's worked out pretty well. And we haven't done anything out of the ordinary. We've just, well, this year we changed to VAM on the seed dressing. Yep, whatever that is. Yep. I don't know the words, so that's how raw I am. The last 2 years we've used Foscal, ZMC, and what's the other one? Forbic, that's the word. Yeah. So, and that's been on our beans. We had beans there that was this high, looking really good, and got smashed by fungus. Hardly got any beans, but the next year they retested and bang, oh, she's. Whether it was fungus that made the carbon go up, or whether it was the stuff we put on, but it's just, yeah, it's just the first initial. I think we outlaid $30 a hectare, but that's taking off some of the other chemicals too. Yeah. So that's about all.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks very much, Jeff. And I think that's, from our perspective, a lot of the things that we look at is, so say I'll just focus on one. I'm not going to talk about product, but I'll just give you an example. So say our minerals, so ZMC. So we have a ZMC that's a synthetic ZMC, no different to what you're using, but our chemists brew metabolites and they actually put it in a metabolite base. Then we add fulvic acid to it, and it's similar sort of dollars to what you would pay, but also stimulates carbon. So all we're doing is trying to put a food source in, trying to buffer carbon emissions, and also working on feeding the biology, and it's as simple as that. And so, to me, I think that we can overcomplicate and try and understand everything that's going on with it. And so, from our perspective, it's about just taking that first step and learning about it. We're really comfortable that we've partnered with AgriProve. AgriProve have now got the highest majority of soil carbon projects in Australia, and what we're interested in for you guys is size and scale. So we want credibility. We want someone that's closely linked to the Clean Energy Regulator to be able to initiate change, because you've got to bear in mind we're dealing with a government department that have absolutely zero idea how to grow a crop or to raise cattle or to do any of those things. So you're dealing with fundamentally people that don't understand it. The other really exciting thing that's just been released by the government is AgriProve and others now have the opportunity to come up with their own kind of eligible activities. So one of the ones that we're in discussion now is also using dissolved urea as a urea minimisation, reducing urea use as being an eligible activity to build carbon going forward. So there's some really exciting things coming out in this space in the future. So we've now got, I think it's about 14 different projects that have all shown lead indicator positivity. And I think, Harry, you've got the numbers. There's about 9, I think, that are actually going to look to go through to the audit stage with AgriProve's help. So it is real. So it is really come from theoretical, and we were all out talking to farmers and we're going, we think this is going to happen and we think it's real and it should work. Whereas we can actually tell you now, so in Western Australia we've got we're going through to credit issuance in Western Australia, Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales. So we've got quite a breadth. The other part that I was asked earlier is what sort of crop types and rainfall. So we've got projects down as low as just under 300 mil rainfall, right through to one of Brendan's clients in Tasmania who's at 1.2 metre. We've got starting carbon levels in projects at 0.2 through to Mark's in Tasmania, he started at 7.6. And so we've got it in grazing, we've got it in cereal, we've just done our first 1,000 or so acres in vines. We've just started our first almond orchard, we're just going through the process of that. And of course we've got a lot of pivots in Jamie's area and in the southeast in onions, potatoes, etc. So we're getting enormous amounts of data that are starting to really build to this whole overview. So I'm happy to answer any practical questions. We've got Mel and Harry here as well if anyone's got any questions on how it works or what do we do or how do you get started. But in summary, step one is to really just get that baseline done and then everything happens from a baseline. So the first thing that I would say is get your baseline done, set up a project. The other major question that we get is I've had a lot of people say, well, we don't want to start a project because what if the government change where we have to offset our own emissions? Is that someone, you've probably got those concerns around here? Again, under our model, when you get the issuance of credits, imagine your credits are like a share certificate. You've got a number of options you can do with those. Number one is you can sell at spot, so you can sell immediately and AgriProve handle that. For about 43 cents a credit, you can hold that for future sale. So a bit like a farm managed deposit, you can roll over financial years. You could sit on it and keep it like a superannuation for future sale. And then the other one, certainly in the produce market, so in our sort of potato customers, onion and the wine, they want to market as carbon neutral. And rather than go and buy credits to offset to be carbon neutral, they're going to use their own called insets to be able to then market their own produce as carbon neutral to get an advantage on that. And I know with Nathan and Colin, they also through their sheep feedlot, there's an opportunity for them to market that carbon neutral. And what do you get, another 50 cents or something? It's not a heap, but all those things are starting to build, that there's starting to be additional reward to be able to do it. So I'm happy to take a few questions, and if there's no questions, we'll wander out and have a look at a few trials, but happy to answer a couple of practical questions. Yes, Angus?
Correct me on my maths, please. So approximately $1,000 a hectare, divided by $38, current ACCU price is about 26 ACCUs in what period of time?
12 months.
12 months.
Yeah.
Divided by 3.67, which is how many CO2 equivalent?
Yep, to get back to tonnes of carbon in the soil.
Gets you about 7 tonnes of carbon up.
Yeah.
7 tonnes total organic carbon up in 12 months' time,
Yeah.
which by anyone's measure is dramatic, is phenomenal. What, is it reasonable to expect that trajectory to plateau off fairly quickly? That's a steep rise. Perhaps you could surmise a lot to do with the management change and the introduction of BAM and all of those other synergistic things that have been put in the system in year one. What sort of conversation we could be having with your carbon farmer around what the next 5 to 10 years look like, and perhaps don't anticipate $1,000 worth of generation per year going forward?
So the discussion we have with the farmers is we only need to get that a couple of times over the 25 years, and we've made a pretty good return, first of all. So it's way above what our view was, Angus. So in our modelling, we kind of look at about 9 ACCUs per year. That's 0.1% by the time, and that's net to the farmer. That's by the time everything's netted out. So this is significantly higher than that. But what we don't know is then we can surmise on the trajectory, but we don't think you're going to do it at that level year on year on year. But I will say a couple of things. Number one is we're building that level and they're still not actually on the full LawrieCo system. So they're doing chunks of it, but not all of it. And that's part of, again, what we're telling them to do. Don't go in boots and all and do everything. We'd love you to, day one, but don't do that until you're confident. So we see that there's addition of better management that could still come into that. Then the other one that's really interesting is, so Luke's father joined we enabled him to set up a carbon project as well. He didn't put the same level of inputs that Luke did, and we've literally got some good target, similar soil type, 2.5 k's away as the crow flies, a bit further. 25, sorry, I missed a zero. So 25 k's away, similar, same region. And the yield on carbon was chalk and cheese. I've got the numbers here. Then the other one that we've also done is on Jeff's property. So we've had a number of different projects. There was one of the projects where nothing was added, and it was only 20% of where he actually intervened with it. So to answer the question, we don't actually know yet. We don't know, because we haven't done it under this method for year on year on year. Certainly within the business, we would expect that we should be able to continue at about 9 net credits per year in a cropping system with rainfall, not in a drought. The other big question that we get, that I know is probably coming next, is, again, under the model, if carbon goes backwards, you don't have to pay it back. So that's allowed for in the system. So you don't have a liability if your carbon goes back. And then one of the uniquenesses of the AgriProve model is, at the end of your 25 years, there's not a make good that the farmer has to wear. AgriProve wear anything that has to happen in terms of a decline in carbon. So it's these nuances that a lot of people, and we wouldn't expect to, don't think through at the time they start a project, that are absolutely critical. So we've slept it, eat it, breathed it. We've looked at all the different models that we can do. So we're pretty comfortable. I think, Mel, you alluded to you're comfortable, you've got the best one. We're happy to be your partners in it, because we do believe it's the best one as well.
Is there any early, and Mel, you might be able to answer this as well, is there any early evidence or situations where properties with carbon projects have been transacted, have been sold?
Yep. Yep, absolutely.
Talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of examples. So there was one in Jamie's area where we'd set up the whole farm, and then he rang and said, I wanted to sell off a block. And he said, Matt, what do we do? How do we do it? And I said, well, here's how you do it. I said, let's do some projections on what we think the carbon's going to yield and put it as a sale advantage to say, we're selling this block, it's already registered, here's what we think the yield can be, and do a net present value on it and make some additional money. So that was one. We've also got another one in Murray Bridge where he sold one of his whole farms, and the acquirer has then been quite excited that it was set up with the carbon projects and actually has expanded more onto it. And then we've got another one in Western Australia where he sold the block, and in that case we paid AgriProve for the soil testing, because it was only after 1 year, so we paid back the fee of the soil testing, and that acquirer has decided not to go ahead with the carbon project. So still a lot of flexibility on what you do from a sales perspective. Yeah.
I've already done
See, so it would be just sold as a value add. I would have. That's how we've suggested.
I've been worried about doing it for ages and ages and ages, and then I just had this light bulb moment. Thought property with a carbon project is going to be more valuable than a property without one. And I just had that thought and said, got on the phone, I want to do this.
Yeah, and it is a really interesting topic. One of the things that I also do is talk to a lot of banks. I was saying to Brittany and the girls earlier that I've gone over. Harry and I spoke to 80 Commonwealth Bank people, because they're getting their heads around it. So all of a sudden, eligible interest owner consent. I went over to Western Australia. I spoke to Rural Bank, to their credit people, just around saying their view was, well, hang on, this might make production go down, but the thinking and the understanding in the Australian market was very much around the tree projects. So they thought land was getting locked up, they thought they were taking production out, thought it was high risk for the farmers. Whereas again, if you think about it as being positive for your enterprise, and then the bonus is being able to trade carbon, that's how you should look at it. Don't go into it saying our primary objective is to trade carbon. I think you should look at it from your whole ecosystem and say at the end it's a bonus when we trade carbon.
How do you, if you go to audit, what evidence do you have to provide that you're doing something different if you're using a seed treatment or whatever?
Yeah.
Just an invoice?
Yep, that's all. That's basically it. I don't know, Luke, whether you want to talk to what you've gone through the audit process now.
We run AgWorld, so probably the benefit with having AgriProve is they've done all the legwork, because there's been a fair bit, and if I had to do it myself, I wouldn't do it because it seems to be a nightmare. But Monday we have our government audit, so AgriProve are coming out. You coming out, Brendan? Yeah, all right, good. Bring the vanilla slice. And they're going to do a site visit, so they'll visit the farm. It's fairly dry because I was sort of like, I'm still pretty harsh with visitors on the farm. Like I said, like with AgriProve when they want to come out when it's wet. So the government guys, hopefully they pack their gumboots and they can walk out there and look at where they've taken the sample, and then we'll go back to the office and we'll have a look at the paperwork. But most of the legwork has been done by AgriProve and Harry and stuff to make sure that everything's in order.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how much evidence do you actually need?
Depends how much activities you're saying that you've been doing to build eligible activities. So
But you only need one.
I only need one. So we just try to keep it simple. The simplest form would be a photo of the shuttle on the farm that says this is the new practice, and maybe a spray record, something like that.
Yep.
All applicable.
Yeah, so we use AgriView. Our process with our last crops was the shit that eats the stubble. What's it called? Digest. Some boost in crop. What else? Foscal. Humates, humates in with sowing. We changed from tine seeder to disc seeder with that paddock. We used UAN instead of, and what? And enhance on any granular urea. We use UAN with full Vic, and that's just all recorded in AgWorld.
Yep.
So, and we run a fairly big business, so invoice-wise, it's pretty easy. Like everything's in MyOb, and it's all allocated to the various cost models in our business.
Cheers. Thanks. So thanks very much. I hope as we go on this journey, to me, it's really just about walking together, and that was really what we started with Jamie and the team and with other agronomy groups around Australia. We've just said, let's get some farmers, let's learn together, and let's start a journey. And as it's gone on, we've certainly learned a lot. And as we've got to each phase, there's a lot more to be learned. But it's not as complicated if you're using a proponent. It's not as complicated as you think. You can actually set it up quite simply and get on with it. So thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity. So, sorry, another one.
Just got
Yeah.
one final one for you.
Yep.
How long do you think will be until we're actually backed into a corner and we actually have to account for our carbon emissions and our offsetting, so we're actually forced into a program like what AgriProve offers?
Well, thank goodness I'm not in politics, but I have spoken to a lot of politicians, and they keep saying, no, we're not, because we see agriculture as a key food source and a driver of Australia. So that's the political view. If you want my personal view, is I think that within the next 10 years we'll see it, because we've already seen it in New Zealand, then reversed. We've seen it in the EU. They're actually getting really serious about it there. And so if they can stop live sheep export in Western Australia, they can turn on a dime and change their minds. So I won't sort of give a projection on it, but it will have to come.
So it'd be wise to start looking into
Yeah.
something like this.
Yeah.
They just took your V8s away.
But I think I think the other part of it too is that people get oversensitive about agriculture, and I don't know if you're aware, but if you look at global emissions, 75 or 74 and a bit % of all of the emissions globally come from energy. Agriculture accounts for about 13%, and of that 13%, about 4.5% is due to burning. So if all of a sudden we can make some simple changes like digest, obviously methane is a big component in it, but we were talking earlier that what they're not taking into account, and we've had this discussion with MLA, is the importance of animals in that whole carbon cycle. So they're measuring methane, but they're not actually measuring the fact that it's it's chewing it off, it's creating, you know, root exudate, it's doing all of those things. And so I think that for groups like MLA and others, they need to really start lobbying the government on completely understanding the benefits as well of livestock rather than just what the negatives are. So, thanks.